Just out of curiosity, very briefly on this, what's it like coming as a guest conductor for a particular orchestra, like the London Symphony Orchestra, or maybe the London Philharmonic Orchestra?
Well, you know, it's not exactly like conducting, because you're doing very comparatively short sections of music in a studio environment.
Right.
But if you're playing your own music, they're very generally generous to you. You know, it's not as though you're playing the repertoire, you're trying to tell them how to play something they've played 100 times before. So they you know, and I mean, generally I've always been very lucky and happy with orchestras, because you know, orchestras are, we all, you know, people love the same thing, and so you have fun. You know, you don't have to make too much of it, and they're very, very skillful. I mean, so really,
they're the best in the world.
Yeah, they make your life quite easy in a way, because they know what to do without you telling them.
Well, we mentioned earlier about your television work.
Yeah.
This time with Sir David Attenborough, particularly in the wildlife area,
yes.
of which, of course, you've been awarded a BAFTA for it.
Yes.
Can I ask first off, how did you get into the television naturalistic sort of filming, documentary style music?
Well, I went to. I first started by doing one of his series, which he had, you know, his series Life in the Life of Plants, Life in the Underground, things like that. He did one called The Trials of Life, and I did that years and years ago. And one of the producers of that series, Alistair Fothergill, he asked me if I would then do this, what was then a groundbreaking series called Blue Planet.
Yes.
And that's really where it started for me, because Blue Planet became popular, made natural history, which was a little bit of a niche.
Yeah.
It turned it into this big popular television thing. And so that's really where, in a curious way, although it wasn't one of David Attenborough's programs himself, because it was him, and that's in a way where our relationship began. And you know, I'm his biggest fan. He's got the most musical voice, and it's a great help when you're writing,
yes. because
you're not looking only at the footage, but you're also responding to the way that he interprets the footage.
Very much so.
Because he's like an actor, you know, and he would have been a brilliant actor actually, but he has this wonderful inflections and cadences in his voice, which I like to work with a lot.
The interesting thing about all your naturalistic compositions and conducting that you've done is each segment you've given its own unique voice. And whether it's the underwater, maybe you have like the long flowing score, or if it's like the microscopic ants or the insects, it's more of like a staccato or a pizzicato sort of time, and it's just great just listening to it, you know.
Well, that's very nice. I mean, I think that natural history for a film composer, the thing about natural history is that the footage that you look at, because you're working with the film all the time, the footage will never let you down, because the behaviour is so natural, it's so unmessed around with, nobody's telling them what to do, they're doing their thing, you know. That because of that, it's actually it never tires you out when you're working on it, and so it's really fun to try and characterise things or give things, just make people feel like they're closer to it rather than further away from it, or that somehow it's just academic or whatever, to actually try and involve people in what the creatures are doing and what the landscape is about and things like that. You know, so I love doing it.
One thing that I certainly have noticed, particularly with Blue Planet, is it's actually got young people more into sort of classical orchestration music, as opposed to maybe a lot of upbeat dance music is more to hear constantly now, either on the radio or television.
Yeah, I think that you know, I mean, I hope anyway, music's music, and I think if people think, oh, orchestras, that's boring, you know, that actually they're not always boring. It can be good, and if that approach, because things go in cycles, you know, a little bit as well. So if that approach, like an orchestral way of doing that, draws people in, and they think. And when I do live shows, not like tonight, but when I do live concerts, a lot of young people come, and a lot of people who come have never been to hear an orchestra, and that gives me particular pleasure, because I think, well, if they come for this and they hear the orchestra, and then they may come back and hear the orchestra play something else, then I've done a good thing for orchestras, because, you know, orchestras are absolutely brilliant and wonderful to watch, and as well as to hear. It is a great thing to see an orchestra playing, and so if I can do that a little bit, then that makes me happy.
For me personally, I mean, orchestral music and any sort of score music is an essential part of film and television.
Yeah.
And for people like yourself who take a lot of essence, and you can tell your soul and your whole personality goes into each piece that you would write, compared to some people who might just put. Some people might just sort of repeat phrases, the likes of James Horner, for instance, will reuse phrases again and again and again. If you're familiar with his works, in certain films, you see this same phrase coming up over and over again in numerous films. And perhaps even the likes of John Williams again, uses the same sort of phrasing, same sort of style again and again.
I think that there's two things. I mean, I think we all do that a little bit. And you've talked about two people who I think are really very, very gifted.
Don't get me wrong, I think they're extremely gifted, but I reckon for someone who's like a fan of I think the same sort of piece just
of course it's also because which is one of the traps is, for anybody, is that John Williams wrote brilliant scores in a certain style, and people then wanted him to write more brilliant scores in exactly the same style for their films. So it's quite difficult to get away from the language you create once you create a language, and that's why, I mean, I've been very, very lucky all through my career, because I'm touching wood, because I've been able to move from one genre of film to another.
Very much so.
Art films, more comedies, romantic comedies, natural history documentaries, etc., etc. Films for Ken Loach, which are completely different from romantic comedies, and I've enjoyed that because it's helped me in a way, not just have to find the same, remine the same territory all the time, So, but you try to put yourself into everything. You try to give away a bit of yourself to everything, and you hope that it's not in vain, that the film comes back at you, and usually it does.
Probably the best testament would be the fact that we're talking about Gandhi, which is well over 30 years now.
It's a long time ago.
And it's still on the tip of everybody's tongue, whether you're talking about the visualizations or the score. And you mentioned some of the comedy pieces, the likes of The Fisher King, Groundhog Day, compared to the more dramatic pieces, such as maybe Shadowlands, and another one of my personal favourites being Dangerous Liaisons.
Right. That's a good film.
Oh, it's an amazing film, and the fact that it was set based on the book, and then the visualization the wonderful term, it's beyond my control with your score. It always brings a smile on my face.
No, that's a really that's a great film, and people should make more films like that nowadays, really. But I've had a lot of luck in them, and also they've all had a language of their own. A lot of the films, which in a way have suggested the musical language, which again is largely luck, because if you do something that does have no musical language, then you have to provide everything. But when you have a film like Dangerous Liaisons, which is set in the
1700s, 1800s,
the 1780s or wherever it was, and then and it's in France, and you have the opera house, and and it's shot exactly like a Hitchcock thriller.
So
that you've got the mixture of that, the kind of the school of Hitchcock thrillers, Bernard Herrmann's music, etc., and you've got Paris 1780. It's quite a heady mix, so you get a lot of ideas running around in your head, which is a great thing.
Well, it's been a very great pleasure talking to you.
Thank you very much indeed.
If I could ask you just one last question before I go. I'm sure it's going to be very difficult for you to pick maybe one sort of score or piece of work that throughout your history or your work really that you think is the most best achieved, but if there's one thing you're most remembered for, what would be the biggest memory from your own personal experience of working in films and television?
I think, I went to school in Oxford, and I never really imagined that I would go back in my professional life. And I think when I first worked with the choir at Magdalen College, Oxford, and they sang the anthem that opens Shadowlands, I think that was a special time for me.
It is a wonderful piece.
Thank you very much.
It's been a pleasure talking to you. Thank you very much indeed, George.
Thank you.
Thanks.